So 6 years ago, my then boyfriend, now husband, gave me a brand new set of paints for the holidays. And when I opened up the package, he was like, "You can finally get back to painting." And to this day, we don't know where that miscommunication happened because I had actually never painted before in my life. So I put the paints on the kitchen counter and they sat there for a couple of weeks, making me feel really, really guilty until finally, one night after dinner, I turned to him and said, "Okay, what do you think I should paint?" And he jokingly, I hope, suggested that I do a portrait of him in the style of Van Gogh. And I thought, wow, that sounds really hard, but let's give this a shot. So that's just how I started my first painting. I remember laying out my materials, and I remember those first couple of brush strokes, but honestly, after that, the rest of the night is a total blur. And at one point, I ripped myself away from the canvas, and I looked at the clock, and it was 3 a.m. on a work night, and I had just painted the whole thing in one night. And just like that, I was completely addicted to painting. So sometimes I like to think about how lucky it is that I stumbled into painting in the insane way that I did. And that brings me to the first point I'd like to leave you with today, which is that potential is everywhere, and we're far more limited by our lack of experiences than by our lack of abilities. So I hope you are constantly trying new things. You never know what you're going to discover about yourself. So it's now 6 years later, and I've done over 250 paintings, the majority of which are pet portraits, and that probably has you wondering how I landed on pet portraits as my primary subject matter. So to answer that question, I should tell you a little story about my childhood. When I was growing up, my dad used to occasionally say, "Adriana, perky is a lifestyle choice." And this man truly lived by his words. I mean, he would whistle while doing the dishes. Once I broke one of his ancient Egyptian relics while pretending to be a helicopter, and he was just like, "Kids will be kids." And another time I overheard him impersonating Elvis going through puberty to get my mom to laugh. So all this to say that when you grow up in this type of environment, becoming a tortured artist is not really a viable option. Not that I didn't give it a shot. I actually once spent a couple of weeks working on this really moody and introspective self-portrait, and I quickly lost interest in it and abandoned it to do a series on cupcakes instead. So I had it in my head that a real artist was supposed to be interested in the darkest and the most uncomfortable parts of our lives, but all I really wanted to do with my paint was to celebrate the things that made life worth living. And for a long time, I worried that my art was somehow less worthy or less important because it was so darn upbeat. But then I discovered pet portraits. And in retrospect, I think it makes perfect sense that I would find myself here. I mean, what better way to celebrate life than to capture that relationship between a person and their dog or their cat? My pet portraits are bright and cheery, but they're also deeply personal. And my work has given me the opportunity to have conversations with my clients where they tell me what their dogs and cats mean to them. And I've heard some incredible stories about the dog who was the rock in his family while his mom went through chemo, or about the sweet one-eyed rescue here in Madison who really inspired his family with his passion for tennis balls and life up until his last days. Or about the cat who had seen his mom through several breakups and an engagement and a marriage and a baby, and that cat was officially the longest relationship in her life. So these are small personal stories, but they're really not that small. And sometimes I don't even feel like I'm painting pet portraits. I feel like I'm capturing a slice of a family's storyline, or that I'm somehow preserving real happiness in paint. So I don't know if you can tell, but I am obsessed with pet portraits. And I think one of the reasons is that they're right at this intersection of sweet and important and of upbeat and meaningful. And as a painter, that's just exactly where I want to be. So it's taken me some time, but I've finally gotten used to this idea that my pet portraits are never going to be super serious, and I'm okay with that. I'm not shooting for serious anymore. I'm shooting for playful and for sweet and for devoted and maybe mischievous. And that brings me to the second point I'd like to leave you with today, which is that just because something is goofy or upbeat, it doesn't mean it's not important. And don't be fooled into thinking that dark necessarily equals deep. And most importantly, take every chance you can to capture and celebrate the things in your life that bring you happiness. So a few years ago, I started painting pet portraits on a whim, and I remember painting my 10th one and thinking, man, I could do this forever. And I probably will. Thank you.